On a clear Saturday in December 1875, an explosion rocked the German port town of Bremerhaven and could be heard 60 miles away. An American businessman named William King Thomas had insured a barrel of caviar that had slipped off its winch while being loaded aboard a passenger liner called the Mosel. Unexpectedly, the barrel exploded. It had been filled with dynamite. The insurer of the barrel was tracked down to his cabin but found fatally wounded. He had shot himself after writing a note taking responsibility for the explosion. He had set a timer for the dynamite for it to explode a few days later while the ship was in the Atlantic. Instead, it had exploded on the dock, killing around 80 people. In reality, William King Thomas was named Alexander Keith. Born in Scotland, but spent most of his time in Nova Scotia, Canada during the Civil War, where he helped the South purchase needed goods as the unofficial consul to the Confederacy. Welcome everyone to Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and today we'll be looking into a serial killer who used the Civil War to profit by swindling many people out of their money and killing hundreds of people along the way. Alexander Keith's father and uncle both owned and operated breweries in Halifax, Nova Scotia. After his father's brewery went out of business, he began working for his uncle and quickly became his right-hand man. But when the Civil War broke out, Keith saw an opportunity to make money because of the blockade around the South. Halifax itself was heavily divided between the Union and the Confederacy. Those who supported the South did so because of their concern over the English textile industry that depended so heavily on the Southern cotton. Keith sided with the Confederacy, but it is most likely he chose that side because he could financially benefit from the sale of arms and other goods to them. In December 1863, the American steamer the Chesapeake was captured by Confederate agents near Cape Cod and sailed into the port of Halifax. After getting help from local Haligonians, the steamer headed back out but was captured by Union warships in Nova Scotian waters, which upset the British. Both countries worked out an international dispute diplomatically, and the British subjects on board were to be sent off the ship. 2 were to be let go, and a third, who had killed a sailor, was to be turned over to local authorities to be extradited to the United States. The transaction required the arrested man to be unshackled on the pier and then, as a free man, arrested by Nova Scotian authorities. During that brief moment of freedom, a rowboat appeared alongside the wharf as 3 men simultaneously assaulted William Hutt, the local arresting officer. The now free man leapt into the skiff and the 2 oarsmen pulled away, secreting him away into Ketch Harbor about 10 miles southwest of Halifax. One of Hutt's assailants was Alexander Keith. Even though what he did was illegal, in court it was ruled since the arresting officer was not in uniform, Keith and the others could not be found guilty. Months before the Chesapeake Affair, the U.S. had kept tabs on Keith because of his Confederate sympathies. A short time after the affair, New York City's postmaster intercepted a letter addressed to Keith written in some kind of code. A few War Department telegraphers had taught themselves the art of code breaking and deciphered the letter, and another letter discovered a few days later. It revealed a vast network of spies and Confederate agents in the Union and in Canada. Among the conspiracies were plans to counterfeit U.S. currency, purchase and transport 12,000 weapons to the South, and a plan to use Greek fire to burn down New York City. A Kentucky-born doctor named Luke Blackburn, who doctored people with yellow fever in Bermuda, met with Keith to arrange for loads of yellow fever-infected clothing to be distributed all over the North to kill out the population, and also to send yellow fever-infected jackets to Abraham Lincoln and other politicians. In reality, yellow fever is contracted through mosquito bites, not infected objects, but this clearly demonstrates the lengths that Keith and others were willing to do in order to cause havoc in the North and use the South's need for supplies to make money for themselves. A purchasing agent from the state of Virginia approached Keith to coordinate the purchase of locomotives for the Confederacy in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Keith got investors to put their names as owners of the engine, and Keith himself would use their money to act as a purchasing agent for them and claim the engines were being sent to Scotland. However, once the ships picked up the locomotives, they would head south to Virginia and run the blockade to deliver the merchandise. Keith's investors did not know one another, and did not know that he had scammed them out of thousands of dollars by tricking each man into thinking they were the only investors, and thus Keith would pocket all the extra cash. When Keith went to Philadelphia to order the engines, federal agents arrived to arrest him. Most likely the company that made the locomotives turned him in because the gauges that were being put on the engines were of southern measurements, not the gauges used in Scotland. Keith was able to talk his way out of the situation by insisting that he was simply a purchasing agent and did not know where the trains were going. The authorities believed him, and he was $85,000 richer. While running the locomotive scam, Keith discovered a second lucrative income stream: maritime insurance fraud. In order to frustrate the seizure of blockade runners, they often had owners of record in Halifax. This made them technically vessels of a neutral power and not subject to the Union Navy commandeering. In mid-1864, Major Norman Walker, a Confederate agent, moved his family from Bermuda to Halifax to escape a yellow fever outbreak and to stay in a Confederate-friendly city. While in Nova Scotia, he met Alexander Keith, who convinced him to invest $40,000 in pork to run the blockade to be distributed to the South. In reality, Keith took Walker's money and said he'd lost the investment because of corrupt middlemen and chaotic nature of war. Keith's scams, for the most part, hadn't involved much violence, but that would change. One of the senior Confederate Secret Service officers in British North America, named Patrick Martin, was part of the intricate southern cotton trading operation out of Montreal. Being a prominent southern operative in Canada meant he came into contact with Alexander Keith. They decided to invest in a pair of schooners to help run the blockade. On its maiden voyage, Keith convinced Martin to accompany the ship up the St. Lawrence River, but it never returned. Keith had sabotaged the ship, most likely with a timed explosive. Since he was the only owner alive, Keith collected the $100,000 insurance money, and when the second schooner perished, he received another windfall of insurance money. His numerous insurance fraud scams led to the murder of hundreds of people aboard various ships. To escape the numerous people he defrauded, he traveled to the United States and bounced around there using aliases and taking out more insurance policies on ships and collecting the money when they mysteriously disappeared. Eventually, his scams would take him to Germany, where in 1875 he would take his own life after the failed sinking of the Mosel. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped highlight an aspect of Civil War history that you may not have come across before. Thank you all again, and have a great day.
Historian, where do you roam? Historian, far from home. Have history will travel reads the card of a man, a professor with knowledge in the heartland. To educate the world is his mission. A professor of fortune is a man called historian.